Today's daf we're going to be learning is Chullin daf kuf daled. We're going to start getting really into, as I said in yesterday's daf, all the real interesting kashrut stuff of milk and meat. And we're going to start a little bit today about the issue regarding waiting between milk and meat, or chicken and meat, or maybe not. So we're going to start today with a quick review of our Mishnah. We said kol basar asur l'vashel b'chalav. You can't cook any meat. Remember, we said any meat means anything other than chutz m'basar dagim v'chagavim, other than fish and grasshoppers, but everything else you can't cook with milk. You can't put it together on the same table with cheese. Chutz m'basar dagim v'chagavim, other than fish and grasshoppers. Hanodir min habasar. This is the last part of the Mishnah that we didn't get to yesterday. If you take a vow, I am not going to eat meat. Mutar b'basar dagim v'chagavim. You can eat fish and grasshoppers, but you can't eat chayot. You can't eat, the real chidush is not birds. Okay, we're going to talk about this in a bit. So the Gemara first infers something from the Mishnah. And this we mentioned yesterday was a bit of a source of debate, and today we're going to see that debate in the Gemara. Ha'of asur mideoraita. The fact that it lists, at first the Gemara assumes, because the Gemara Mishnah said all basar can't be cooked in milk, it must mean all basar is all the same, meaning even chicken is by Torah law forbidden to cook with milk. Kiman, according to who does this go? And this is going to start us on a question. Delo ki Rabbi Akiva. Well, it must not be like Rabbi Akiva, because the Rabbi Akiva, if we held like Rabbi Akiva, ha'amal chayav ofei no min Torah. Rabbi Akiva says that the meat of a chaya, an undomesticated animal, and a bird is not by Torah law, not forbidden by Torah law, because the Torah talks about a gedi, and a gedi is a domesticated animal. So not undomesticated animals and not birds, only by rabbinic law. Don't get excited, you can't eat them with cheese, but only by rabbinic law. Ema seifa, but what's the problem? If the first part of the Mishnah doesn't match Rabbi Akiva, we're going to see in a minute that the last part of the Mishnah completely matches Rabbi Akiva. Ema seifa hanodir min abasal mutar b'basar dagim b'chagavim. If you vow not to eat meat, you are actually permitted to eat fish and grasshoppers. Now, what do you infer from here? Ha'of asur, chicken would be forbidden. But Atan the Rabbi Akiva, that fits Rabbi Akiva. Why? We're going to see an interesting debate. Da'amar kol mili demimlech ale shaliach bar minehu. Anything a shaliach would ask you. Okay, if I send you to the store and I say, can you please buy me the following thing? And I say, okay, I want you to buy me meat. And you come back to me and you say, listen, Michelle, I didn't find meat in the store, but I found chicken. If that's the case, if it's something you would ask me, now you could say this would actually mean it's not meat, because if it was meat, why would you be asking me, right? But let's just think about it. So in other words, why would you be asking me? You would just buy it, because I said meat includes chicken, so you would buy chicken. You wouldn't have to check with me. But Rabbi Akiva says, if you ask me, listen, there was no meat, would you take chicken? Then that's considered that chicken is a type of meat. And that's Rabbi Akiva's position. We're going to now see the machloket. Titnan. It says in the Mishnah, it says, Tanya here, it should be Titnan. It's a Mishnah in Nedarim. Hanodir min hayarak. Okay, yarak is vegetables, but obviously must have meant a certain type of vegetables, that word. Mutar b'dlu'in. Okay, you're allowed to eat gourds. For Rabbi Akiva oser. Rabbi Akiva forbids. Amrula l'Rabbi Akiva. Halo omer adam l'shlucho kach lanu yarak. If somebody says to their messenger, go to the store for me and buy me yarak, v'hu omer, and you would come back and say, lo matzati ela d'lu'in, listen, I didn't find yarak, I only found gourds. So what do you see? It obviously is not yarak. If it was yarak, then they wouldn't have asked the question. That kind of sounds like the more logical or the more intuitive thing you would say. But Rabbi Akiva has a really good retort. Amar lahen, kenat aval. You're right that someone would ask you, oh, listen, they don't have yarak, but, vegetable or some kind of vegetable, but they have gourds. So, Rabbi Akiva says that proves my point. Klum omer, lo matzati ela kitnit. They didn't come back and say, listen, all I found was legumes, because they knew you weren't looking for legumes. You asked for vegetables. You're not asking for legumes if you say vegetables. But gourd was at least a possibility. Just like if I go to the meat store and I want meat, but you know what, if they don't have meat, I'll buy chicken. So there you have exactly, that's Rabbi Akiva's point. That's going to be considered the same type. And therefore, what's the reason why they wouldn't come back and say, listen, they had legumes? right? Like they had some lentils because elas shedeluim bichlal yarak ve'en kitni bichlal yarak. That proves that deluim could be included in some sort of set of yarak, whereas kitniot, legumes, would never be included in that. And again, that proves, what does this show us? The last line of the Mishnah, if you say, I won't eat basar, you're allowed to eat fish and grasshoppers, but you're not allowed to eat birds. So what do you see, right? Chicken, because chicken is included in meat. So that's Rabbi Akiva's position. So now we have a problem because the Reisha is Rabbanan. The Reisha is not like Rabbi Akiva. And the Seifa is Rabbi Akiva. To which Amar of Yosef, first answer we have is Rebbe He. You could just say the whole Mishnah was put together by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. And on different issues he held by different Tanaim. Right? These are two different issues. But Nidarim, regarding your vow, the Seifa of the Mishnah, Savar like Rabbi Akiva. He held like Rabbi Akiva on that issue specifically. Do we say this is including that category? Bebasal b'chalav savar like Rabbanan. But when it came to basar b'chalav, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi took the opinion of the rabbis, which is it's forbidden by Torah law. That's one possible answer. But another track, and I mentioned this yesterday, this whole debate, whether kol abasar asur l'vashel b'chalav is by Torah law or maybe by rabbinic law. So the reason say it's by Torah law is because meat can't be cooked in milk by Torah law, so maybe chicken also. But comes Rav Ashi and says, Kula Rabbi Akiva, you could explain the whole Mishnah according to Rabbi Akiva. V'hachi kamar, and this is the way to read it. Kol abasar asur l'vashel b'chalav, any meat can't be cooked in milk. Mehemi divrei Torah, mehemi divrei sofrim. Some is by rabbinic law, some is by Torah law. Okay, and each one, might be a different level of prohibition, but in the end, the Mishnah doesn't really care about level of prohibition. They're telling us it's either which way it's prohibited. Chutz mi basar dagim v'chagavim, other than the two exceptions, fish and grasshoppers, she'enam lo midivrei Torah v'lo midivrei sofrim, that they are neither. V'asur laha'alo. Now we're going to the second part of the Mishnah. You can't put cheese and meat on the table at the same time. Amar Rav Yosef, Shma mina, basal of b'chalav de'oraita. Rav Yosef says we can infer from here that oaf and chalav must be by Torah law. Again, same issue as before. We're going to try to infer from the Mishnah it must be a Torah law. Why? Well, de'isa kadatach to Rabbanan, because if you thought it was rabbinic, achila guf gzeira va'ana nigzor ha'ala'a atu achila. If achila of eating chicken and cheese is only by rabbinic law, then you're not going to have a gzeira to say, oh, don't put it on the table. You might come to transgress a rabbinic prohibition. No, usually you have a gzeira on a Torah prohibition, not a rabbinic one. Now, where do we know that you don't do a gzeira l'gzeira? So, ditnan, we're going to learn it from this Mishnah, in Masechet Chala. If you have chala chutz la'aretz. Now, chala is an obligation in Israel by Torah law. Outside of Israel, to give the chala to the, right, in those days, you would take a part of your chala, you would give it to the Kohen. So, you have chala in chutz la'aretz. Now, outside of Israel, it's only by rabbinic law. Ne'echeret im azar al hashulchan. If I am a Kohen, let's say, and I can eat the chala, I can eat it at the same table as a non-Kohen. I don't have to worry that maybe they're going to eat it. Why? Because challah in chutz la'aretz is only rabbinic, and therefore there's no reason to make a gzeira. Don't sit with a non-Kohen at the table, because maybe they'll eat your bread when it's only rabbinic in the first place. And that's going to be our proof. The second part of this Mishnah is, and in addition, nitenet l'chol kohen sheyirtzeh. It's challah from chutz la'aretz. You can give it to any Kohen you want. You don't have to be worried many times you have to be worried not to give things like truma to an Am Haaretz, because the Am Haaretz weren't careful about impurity, and then you're basically putting a stumbling block in front of someone by giving them something that you know is going to make impure and then eat it. So you can't do that. But you can do it outside of Israel. Okay? Now, this is the proof that ain't gozrim gzera l'gzera, and that's why they say it must be that the fact that we can't eat chicken on the table put on at the same time must be by Torah law. Otherwise, there'd be no reason to make a prohibition and don't eat at the same table as someone who's eating cheese, because they might come to mix. But that's Rav Yosef. Amar le Abaye. Abaye says to Rav Yosef, okay, we're at the top of Amud Bet. Bishlama yesh me'inan chalat chutz la'aretz ba'aretz. If you say that chalat chutz la'aretz, and I want to compare these two cases, it's really only going to be comparable to our case if you say that we're talking about challah that came from outside of Israel that was brought into Israel, and we're trying to say you can eat it at the table with a a non-Kohen. If that's what the Mishnah was talking about, then we can learn it here, from here to our case. Why? Because then we could say like this. If you put the challah on the table and eat it with a zar, that might lead you to then put challah that's real challah by Torah law from Israel, because you're in Israel, right? And then there's a concern that you might accidentally, from there, you'll come to put regular challah on the table. That's, again, we don't mean challah for Shabbat. We mean the part that you took out and gave to the Kohen. Okay? Now, if you put challah from Chutz La'aretz on your table in Israel, you might come to put regular challah on, and then you might come to accidentally have a zar, a non-Kohen, eat the challah, which is only for Kohanim. And then we'd say, okay, the fact that we allow you to do this inside of Israel, when you took your challah from outside of Israel, shows that we don't make a gzeira on a gzeira. V'lo gazrina. And then ikala mashma mina. Then we can learn to our case, which we're going to see in a minute why that's more similar. But ela chutz la'aretz, and then you have to add the words. There's a footnote that says add bichutz la'aretz. But if it's challah, the way we understood the case in the beginning, from outside of Israel, that you're eating you're eating outside of Israel. You're at your table outside of Israel. Mishum delay kala migzar, right? You're sitting in New York, you have the challah on the table, you're the Kohen, and you can eat it even though there's a non-Kohen at your table, and don't worry that he's going to eat it. That's because delay kala migzar. That's because there's no reason to make a gzeira there at all. Aval hacha, but by us, isharit leila suke ofu gvi. Now, what's the concern by us? It's more similar to the other one, which wasn't what the Mishnah was talking about. Because by our case, why don't we want chicken and cheese on the table? If we allow chicken and cheese on the table, what might that lead you to do? We're not just worried that you're going to eat the chicken that got mixed up with the cheese. We're worried that atila suke basaru gvina umecha basar b'chalav deoraita. We're worried you're going to put that, if you allow chicken with cheese on the table, you might end up putting meat and cheese on the table. And it's just like if you allow your challah from outside of Israel on your table in Israel, you might end up putting regular challah on the table. And that's going to lead you to doraita. And that's not the case they're saying. Okay, so again, you'll put meat and cheese on the table, umecha basar b'chalav deoraita, and that could lead to a doraita. In other words, in the end, what they're saying is the reason why this is forbidden doesn't prove that chicken is by Torah law can't be eaten with milk, because even if it's only rabbinic, this still could lead to some doraita prohibition. It could lead you to putting chicken on the table with your cheese, and then you might eat the chicken mixed up with the cheese. That's meat on the table, and then you might eat your meat with the cheese, and that's going to be a problem. So we're worried about that. That's a Torah issue. And the challah case, where we said there's no gzeira, it's because the whole thing is rabbinic. There is no concern for any Torah prohibition being transgressed here. So because of that, this doesn't really prove anything. Okay? Now, that's section 1. So let me just clarify and just explain what happened here. Rav Yosef said we can infer from our Mishnah that of b'chalav must be Torah law, otherwise there'd be no reason to make a gzeira. And then they said, no. Even if it's by rabbinic law, there's still a reason to make a gzeira, because maybe you'll end up eating meat and cheese together. Matkifla Rav Sheshet. But then we have another problem, which is, what's this concern with putting this on your table? Sof, tzonein, but tzoneinhu. In the end, it's cold and cold. In other words, we're assuming things on your table aren't super hot. So what's the concern? They're not going to get cooked together. If they're not cooked together, there's no Torah prohibition here. Amar Abaye, gzera shemiyaleh be'ilfas choteach. We're worried you're going to put it in a boiling pot. Sof klisheni hu v'klisheni eno mevashal. But what do you put on your table? You don't put your pots on the table. What do? You move it from a pot into another vessel. That's already called a klisheni. And what do we know about Hilchot Shabbat? Right, from klisheni eno mevashal. If you have something in a second cup, not the vessel it was on the fire, but the next vessel, things don't cook in that, not for the purposes of Shabbat, where we need to know because cooking is forbidden on Shabbat. But, right, this can apply to us as well. Here we need bishul. We're going to use the same definitions of bishul, and nothing's going to cook in a klisheni. So even if theoretically the milk got mixed up or the cheese got mixed up with the chicken, if it's in a klisheni, it's not going to be considered cooked. Now you might say maybe don't eat it and remove where there's parts that are combined, but it won't be the isra basar b'chalav that was cooked together. So how can we explain this? Ela gzera shemiyaleh be'ilfas rishon. What we're worried about here is that maybe you'll put it in, you'll take the pot straight off the fire, put it on your table. It's super hot, things can cook in that, and that's when we're concerned. So don't put anything on the table because you might end up then putting your hot food on the table. So don't make sure there's never cheese and meat or cheese and chicken on your table because they might end up blending together in a hot pot. New Mishnah. Ha'of ole im hagvina al hashulchan ve'eno ne'echal divrei Beit Shammai. This seems to contradict the previous Mishnah. We'll discuss this in a minute. Chicken can be put with cheese on the table. You can put them on the same table together, ve'eno ne'echal, but you can't eat them together, but you can have them on the same table. Divrei Beit Shammai. Ubeit Hillel omrim lo ole ve'lo ochel. Beit Hillel say no, it doesn't go on the table, and you can't eat it. Now what is going on here clearly is that the previous Mishnah that said you can't put them on the table is telling you here that when it comes to chicken, there's a debate between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Okay? Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel disagree about it, and Beit Shammai disagrees with our previous Mishnah. Beit Shammai says, meat can't go on the table, but chicken can. Okay? But you can't eat them, but you can put them on the table. Amar Rabbi Yossi, you probably picked up on this already, but Rabbi Yossi says, Zomi kulei Beit Shammai v'chumrei Beit Hillel. This is one of the cases. Usually it's not the case. Usually Beit Shammai is more strict. Here Beit Shammai is more lenient. Beit Hillel is stricter. Soon the Gemara is going to ask, what is he adding? I could have figured that out myself. Be'ez shulchan amru, the second part of the Mishnah is telling you what kind of table were they talking about, and this is where what we call a table isn't necessarily what they call a table. First of all, there's all these sugyot that talk about tables. We'll see this in the later sugya when we get to waiting between milk and meat, which we're going to talk about today as well. But there they talk about moving the table and clearing off the table. But the table in those days was that when you clear off the table, you literally picked up the table. People sat with their own individual tables, and then they would remove the table from the room. Okay, it was almost like a placemat kind of thing, they sat on the floor, and then they would have a little table in front of them that everyone would eat on. Anyway, now we're going to learn there were other kinds of tables. But it's the table that you eat on. Again, which is a little different from our big tables. It's a little stool kind of thing that you eat on. But if it's the one where you're setting up the food before you bring it out, then you can have milk and cheese and meat together without being worried. Now, why is that? Okay, maybe they didn't pick on their food in the kitchen, but the idea is that you're not really putting your food both in this and that and then end up mixing it together. Okay, in my house, I don't know, everybody nibbles in the kitchen. I could see maybe it causing problems, but maybe it was different in those days, or even so, somebody nibbling is not the same as when everyone's sitting at the table and there's a lot of people, and you can see how the food could theoretically get mixed up. Okay. Now the Gemara goes to ask about Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi Hainu Tanakama. As Rabbi Yossi adds nothing more to Tanakama. Rabbi Yossi says Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel argue, and Beit Shammai is more lenient. And Tanakama, right? Just the fact that they bring this machloket, Tanakama is the fact that Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel disagree. That seems to be some unknown author is kind of telling you this. So how does Rabbi Yossi disagree with that? Maybe eating is a nafkamina between them, meaning, to Ka'amar Tanakama, what did Tanakama say? Right, Tanakama said their debate is whether you can put chicken and cheese on the table, whereas Beit Shammai said yes, Beit Hillel said no, but nobody thought that you can eat cheese and chicken together. Maybe Rabbi Yossi is coming to say that this is a big leniency of Beit Shammai. Maybe he means all the way. Even eating it, Beit Shammai is lenient. However, you can't say that because Hatnan, again it says Tanya, it should be Tanan. It says in the Mishnah in Eduyot, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Shisha dvarim mikulei Beit Shammai u'michumrei Beit Hillel. There's 6 things that are leniencies of Beit Shammai and stringencies. There's 6 cases. That's it. Rabbi Yossi counts 6 that are from Beit Shammai is lenient, Beit Hillel is stringent. And here's one of them. Listen to what it says in Eduyot. Be careful. Pay careful attention. This is Rabbi Yossi speaking. Of oleh magvina la shulchan ve'eno ne'echal divrei Beit Shammai. Of can go on the table, chicken can go on the table with cheese, and it doesn't get eaten. That's Beit Shammai. Ubeit Hillel omrim lo oleh ve'lo ne'echal. Beit Hillel says it doesn't go on the table and it's not eaten. So what do you see here? Both of them say it doesn't get eaten, even Beit Shammai, so you can't say that Rabbi Yossi is adding. Ela hakamashmala man Tanakama Rabbi Yossi. It must be coming to tell you who's Tanakama. Tanakama is Rabbi Yossi. The one who says that this is a machloket Beit Shammai Beit Hillel is specifically Rabbi Yossi. And why is that? Because kol omer davar b'shem omro mevi geula la'olam. If you say something in the name of the person who said it, you bring redemption to the world. What's our proof for this? Shene'amal vatomer Esther lamelech b'shem Achashverosh. B'shem Mordechai. Esther told the king about Bigtan and Teresh in the name of Mordechai, and that in the end helped save the Jewish people, right? So there you see it. Esther, right, ended up bringing redemption to the world because she said it in Mordechai's name and didn't just say, I know the Bigtan and Teresh are trying to kill you. Okay. Now we're going to end with our interesting sugya to end with, and maybe we'll read a little bit of a Tosfot. Tana Agra Chabur de Rabbi Abba. Agra, who's the father-in-law of Rabbi Abba, brought a braita. Of ugvina ne'echalim be'apikoren. Okay, we've been seeing today all this thing about chicken, and chicken's a little different than meat. This says that chicken and cheese can be eaten haphazardly or as freely as you'd like. Okay, which is going to mean, what does that mean? Okay, what, you can eat them together? Right, we just said nobody really holds that way. Well, hu tane la v'hu amrla. He brought the braita and then he explained it. What does it mean? Belo netilat yadayim u'belo kinuach hapeh. You don't have to wash your hands in between, and you don't have to clean your mouth out. This is going to be the start of waiting between milk and meat, meat and milk, etc. So this seems to indicate there's some need in certain cases, obviously between meat and cheese, not chicken and cheese, okay, because that's what it's telling you. Chicken and cheese is fine, doesn't need hand washing, doesn't need mouth cleaning out. Okay, that's chicken and cheese. Now notice it starts off with chicken and says chicken and cheese. That makes it sound like chicken and then cheese, which sounds crazy to us. No, you have to wait between chicken and cheese. So hold off on that for right now. Rav Yitzchak berei devar Masharshia ikla lebei Rav Ashi. So Rav Yitzchak, the son of Rav Masharshia, comes to the house of Rav Ashi. Aitele gvina achal, aitele bisra achal. V'lo mashayade. He gave him cheese, he ate it. He gave him meat, he ate it, and he didn't wash his hands. So notice the order here now. This says specifically cheese first, then meat. Amrele v'hatani Igra chamor de Abba, but didn't Igra, the father-in-law of Rabbi Abba, say ofu gvina nechalim ba'pikorin, which means ofu gvina in, basaru gvina lo. Chicken and cheese, yes, but meat and cheese, no. Now notice, even though meat comes first, it sounds like they're really talking about cheese first. Okay? So here you see that meat and cheese must need something in between, like washing hands and cleaning out your mouth. So to which they answered, and then, right, so what they're basically going to say is, what, right, this was the question. It says you need to wash your hands and you need to clean out your mouth. So how can you possibly say that not? You know, how did you allow this? To which he said, how did you do this yourself, right? He was at Rav Ashi's house, and they brought Rav Ashi, and he did it, right? So now he says, well, what are you doing? To which he answers, Hanimile belelya, aval b'yamama hachazina. So that whole thing with washing your hands is only, I just want to see, 1 second, to Bisra, if they brought to Rav Ashi, right? Ikra Amar Lahu, right? Yeah, it was, they asked Rav Ashi. So anyway, Rav Ashi ate this, and then they said, so Rav Ashi answered, that's at night. At night, you need to wash your hands and clean out your mouth after eating cheese before you eat meat, but not in the day. Because in the day, you can see if there's something in your hands or something in your mouth, it's visible. Because it's visible in those days at night, you couldn't see anything. So it's not an issue. Now, if we read this sugya simply, and we know, we have in our head what we know the halacha is, it seems pretty clear that when it says basal gvina and of gvina, it doesn't mean meat and then cheese. It means cheese and then meat. And it doesn't mean chicken and cheese. It means cheese and then chicken. And then we're going to say the following. After eating cheese, you can't eat chicken. You can't eat chicken without washing your hands and cleaning your mouth. And meat, you would have to at least clean your hands and clean your mouth out. Okay? And that would be the only thing you would need. But this isn't even talking about chicken and then, okay? That's what it sounds like, or meat and then cheese. However, Tosfot questions this and says, but the wording doesn't really seem to match this. So if you look at Tosfot, the first line, Ofel gvina im basar gvina lo, Tema, this is confusing. Dahechi parach mikvina char basar, basar char gvina. Why are you asking a question of cheese after meat, when it was talking about meat after cheese, right? The whole thing was of and then gvina, which would then infer basar gvina. So, right, and that's basically right the case that Rav Yitzchak happened when he was there. Rav Ashi's house was gvina v'achar kach basar achil, okay, v'lo dami k'da'amar b'samuch. Now I'm just thinking, Rav Yitzchak got to Rav Ashi's house and they brought him cheese, right? I knew that I was getting this wrong. It's Rav Yitzchak went to Rav Ashi's house and they brought him cheese and they brought him meat and he didn't wash his hands, and then the people in Rav Ashi's house asked him, "What are you doing?" It wasn't Rav Ashi, it was him. And then he answered, right, that's only at night, not during the day. So it was Rav Yitzchak. Okay. So now, anyway, that's just a side point. Who was this about? Now, so Tosfos suggests that maybe Hachiparch, the Braita de Igra Mashma, Ofu Gvina Nechalim Beli Netilat Yadayim Below Kinuach HaPeh, Aval Shar Basar needs. So Ofu Gvina can be eaten that way. Other meat doesn't. Vehechidami. Now again, he goes to which is first. If it's Basar Tchila, that even Netilat and Kinuach wouldn't be enough until you wait another meal. And that's going to lead us to the next sugya we're going to get to. And I think it's tomorrow's daf or the daf after about waiting between milk and meat. I forget where it comes up. It's definitely coming up very soon. Okay, well, we'll leave that. We're going to get there. And there's other sugyas which talk about you have to wait till the next meal. Okay, so it can't be meat first. It must be cheese first. And it just wasn't particular about how it's said. And then he's going to say like this. It sounds like, okay, even of first, when it said of and gvina, that could be in either direction without anything. But the meat, when we get to the inference about the meat, the inference is really only cheese and then meat. For sure, for meat, you're going to need another meal, and that's because of this other sugya. That's if we view this sugya as part of a group. But Rabbeinu Tam and the halachot gedolot, if you look at a little toward the middle of Tosfot, Rabbeinu Tam afresh v'chein halachot gedolot. Ta'achal basur asur lechol gvina is when it says you can't eat cheese, which is a different sugya, until right after you've eaten meat. That's without netilah and kinuach. But okay, you're ready for this? This is a big shocker. They take this sugya literally. Chicken cheese, meat, and then cheese. Meat and cheese, all it needs is washing your hands and cleaning out your mouth. Now, what do you do with these sugyas that say you can't eat cheese right away, which we're going to get to? Okay, we'll understand this better when we get through all the other sugya, but it's just a fascinating Tosfot. I have to read it to you. But as long as you wash your hands and clean your mouth out, you actually can eat immediately. Okay, guess what? You can go have ice cream after your meal according to this. Okay, don't get too excited. Because then Tosfot says, I hope you didn't stop the tape at that point, because then you'll really think you can. Now, now, if you eat cheese first, you can even eat meat right away without anything. Okay? So that we're going to see later. In that direction, it's fine. In the other direction, it's a problem. Now, we normally think you have to do something. You have to clean your mouth out after cheese, rinse it, something like that. But this basically says, no. After meat, you have to rinse your mouth out or wash your hands. But after cheese, you don't need to do anything before eating meat. Now, what's the problem? There's this story of Mar Ukva that he would wait from meal to meal. Okay? Now, what do we do with that? Oh, well, guess what? There's two options, he says. Either wait till the next meal or wash your hands and clean out your mouth. That's what I said. You really want to eat dessert? Go ahead according to this and eat dessert right away. You want to eat ice cream? Great. Rinse out your mouth. You could do that instead of waiting till the next meal. Why you would say wait till the next meal, right? Some people say maybe he was just stringent. Okay? However, even though Rabbeinu Tam and the Baal Halachot Gedolot suggest this crazy reading, again, crazy for us because it's so different from what we know halacha l'maaseh, but it's really not so crazy from the sugya because it does say ofen gvina and then basar and gvina would only need washing, right? Now, comes Tosfot and he says, and this is always very important, what do people do though? Ha'olam nahagu. Okay, but people, now again, there's two ways to read this. The first way was, it's obviously talking about cheese first. It just doesn't exactly match the words, but it does match the story. So, there's two ways to read this. It says, but the world, nahagu, everybody does, shelo le'echol gvina achar basar kal. They don't eat cheese after meat, even after cleaning your mouth and washing your hands. Afilu achar of, even after cheese, okay? And even though Igros, right, the Agra said, ofik gvina lechalim v'achikorim, which clearly, in others, that's clearly says we don't do like the simple reading of the sugya, because we clearly treat oaf like meat. He says, well, that is because maybe they hold that maybe Agra, this Breita, holds that Ofen Gvina is only rabbinic, whereas we actually hold that it's by Torah law. So anyway, this Tosfot, I'm not going to read to the end of Tosfot, but feel free to try to read it on your own. It's fascinating because it shows that the way we view halacha today and certain things we take as a given weren't always so clearly obvious. Okay? We'll talk more about this because it's a great sugya, the waiting between milk and meat. We're going to see a bunch of other sugyas that relate to it. But anyway, that's it for today. So we're going to review. We started with this question of, can we infer from the Mishnah for sure that the chicken is forbidden by Torah law? And if we do, we're going to have a problem because that's against Rabbi Akiva. And the second line is like Rabbi Akiva, but we came up with two explanations. Either Rabbi holds like Rabbi Akiva on each, like Rabbi Akiva and not like Rabbi Akiva on the two different issues in the Mishnah. One had to do with vows, one had to do with eating between milk and meat, about eating chicken and meat together. Eating chicken and cheese together, or chicken and milk. And the second one was to say maybe it meant only by rabbinic law, and then it would match Rabbi Akiva completely. Then we said that, again, Rabbi Yosef wanted to infer from the second line about the gzeira of not putting chicken and cheese on the table. It must be Torah law. But then we showed, no. Abaye said, no, it could lead to Torah law, even if it's rabbinic, because you might then put meat on the table with cheese, and then you'd have a problem. From there, we got to, in fact, there's a machloket about chicken being able to be on the table, machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, and Rabbi Yossi, who pointed out this is one of the leniencies of Beit Shammai. And then we said, has he disagreed? He doesn't really disagree. That's his opinion. And we ended with this Ofen Gvinan Echlu Bikorin and what that implies about meat. And again, is it just cheese to meat or maybe even meat to cheese? And with that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day.